Ambassador Katju, now this is the third time, at least officially, we know that Zalmay Khalilzad is meeting with Taliban leaders in the UAE at this time around. How do you read the whole situation? Because there are other countries also there at those talks, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and the UAE, three countries, the only three countries that had recognized the Taliban government when they were in power.
I think you've done very well to recall the Taliban links with the Saudis, the UAE, and of course Pakistan. And it's interesting that they are playing a role at this stage because they've always uh, continued with their connections with the Taliban, I feel. The important thing for me is that the US is clearly in strategic retreat. No previous US administration, neither Obama's nor Bush's, had, so to speak, surrendered it all to the Taliban. The latest round of discussions, at least from the reports that have emanated from Abu Dhabi, indicate that the Taliban are calling the shots. The US has even abandoned, and I'm using that word deliberately, the Kabul authorities, the Afghan government at this time. The entire purpose of the US approach with Pakistan, and Trump has been forced to write this letter to Imran Khan, which is completely in departure, Amitabh, with his pronounced policy on Pakistan and Afghanistan, which he had done on August 21st, 2017, if you recollect. That in this letter, he has pleaded with the Pakistanis that please get the Taliban to have direct negotiations with the Afghan authorities. And the reports indicate that the Afghan government representatives were waiting in the lobby, and they were, while Khalilzad was meeting with the Taliban in the hotel. Yes, and then Khalilzad comes and his people come and tell these Afghan representatives that look, the Taliban are not willing to meet you. So what does this show? This shows two things to me. One, that the Pakistanis are playing with the Americans, using the Taliban as pawns. And two, that the Americans are displaying nothing but strategic desperation. And it's pathetic when the world's preeminent power is forced to do this.
Using the word strategic retreat, strategic desperation of the US, top US Marine commander to the Senate this month itself has accepted, which has been done in the past as well, that Pakistan is using the Taliban as a hedge against India. You're talking about this retreat of the US, $1 trillion estimated to have been spent, over 150,000 people killed, 2,400 plus US service personnel as well. So Donald Trump is desperate to get out of Afghanistan?
I don't think that Donald Trump can completely pull out of Afghanistan. But Donald Trump is desperate to find a way out. He initially put enormous pressure on Pakistan. And since Donald Trump is such a maverick, the Pakistanis were taken aback. But now I think they feel that they have the measure of the man and the measure of his administration. And therefore, they are truly calling the shots. Because what has happened in Abu Dhabi over the past few days, the Taliban have said, we are meeting with the Americans. So hence, the subtext is we are gaining legitimacy. Two, our demands are the same, that foreign forces, which means American forces, NATO forces, must leave Afghanistan. And it's only after that that we'll do anything further. So this shows that this is in actual fact a conversation or a negotiation going on between three parties: the Americans, the Taliban, and the Pakistanis. As far as the others are concerned, including the Afghan government, they will be presented with what has been cooked and they will be asked to eat that dish, whether they like it or not.
The head of the presidential office, Rahimi, is said to be leading the council that has been set up, commission that has been set up by President Ghani in the UAE. But when you're talking about the demands of the Taliban, they seem to have increased. So in Moscow, it was, as it has been, a date for withdrawal of the troops, as you mentioned. Amendment of the constitution was also on the table of some sort, Sharia law, prisoners to be released, the blacklist of travel to be taken off from Taliban leaders. Now, they are suggesting that when Zalmay Khalilzad suggested a 6-month ceasefire, the Taliban responded by saying that you nominate one of our leaders as head of a caretaker government.
What does that show? That shows exactly what I'm saying, that the Taliban are driving this. In Moscow, they were willing to be in the same room, around the same table as members of the High Peace Council of Afghanistan. Now, the High Peace Council is actually an Afghan body. It's a body of the Afghan government nominated by the Afghan government. So they are representatives of the government. Here, they are not even willing to be in the same room. So they are showing the Americans and showing the world that we are actually negotiating with the Americans. And who is Ghani? So the real lesson that has to be drawn is by President Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah. How can they continue with these kind of talks? They must understand that this is not the way to negotiate.
Mr. Katju, now, Zalmay Khalilzad, this is his third trip to the region. This time around, there are 8 countries, and most of them one can understand, apart from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Russia. But Belgium was also added to that list. He went and met dignitaries there. India does not figure at all on his travels to the region or on this subject in particular.
No surprises there. Quite clearly, this is on account of Pakistani sensitivities. And if you recollect, only the other day, there was a great excitement in some sections here of our media because Qureshi, the Pakistani foreign minister, had told the National Assembly that India has stakes or India has a presence in Afghanistan and therefore its cooperation is required. And people said that this is the first time that Qureshi has said that India has stakes in Afghanistan, etc. Nothing of the kind. What Qureshi was signaling was that since India is complicating matters in Afghanistan for Pakistan, the international community, principally the Americans, must insist that India stops those complications. And clearly, their sensitivities, their difficulties with our presence in Afghanistan continue, because of which a situation is that Khalilzad is not even willing to come to India. Now, as far as I'm concerned, India's role in Afghanistan, India's uh, position in Afghanistan is not determined by the Taliban, by Pakistan, or by the Americans. It is determined by the good work that we have done, by the fact that the Afghans accept us as a partner, that the previous Afghan government had decided that India will be the first country with which Afghanistan will have a strategic partnership agreement. That gives us a locus. And it is surprising that contrary to what President Trump had announced in his policy, where he had asked India's presence, although in the economic field, to increase, here is Khalilzad, who doesn't even think it fit that he should visit India in the context of peacemaking in Afghanistan. We
So
should draw appropriate lessons.
another idea that has resurfaced, it seems, is something that I think the U.S. ambassador, ex-U.S. ambassador in India, Robert Blackwell, had raised. Now, if these demands of the Taliban have to be met, there is a view that since anyway they are contesting or in control of over 50% of the country already, according to global figures, UN figures, SIGAR figures, US figures, that some areas in the south and east should be given autonomy under Taliban control if and when they join some caretaker government.
Well, that's going to be a recipe
What is
for disaster. I doubt whether any of the Afghan groups will accept it. Certainly, I don't see the Ghani government accepting it, nor do I see the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, or the Hazaras accept a situation like this. This again is a sign that Americans, the American strategic community and the American political establishment has simply not been able to get its act together. Why? One reason, and one reason alone, Amitabh. And that reason is their refusal to clean up what they themselves have defined as sanctuaries or safe havens for the Taliban in Pakistan. Because of that, they have, as you mentioned some time ago, lost so many, I think it's been around 2,500 American lives. They've lost almost, what, $900 billion in this enterprise. It's gone on for 17 years. It's reduced their patience to zero. And quite frankly, I'm being polite when I say that they are in strategic retreat or and strategic desperation. There's another word which comes to mind.
so you are you going to be undiplomatic and use that word?
Be premature to use it, but well, soon enough we have to.
Now, you were talking about President Ghani and other groups within Afghanistan not accepting certain terms that the Taliban may want or the US may even consider giving. Now, how does the dynamic play out in terms of presidential polls? The date which has been set, at least the month has been set next year, and in terms of the Americans wanting the Taliban on the table before that or after that or in the caretaker government, how does all that come together?
I think that's a sideshow now, quite frankly. The real show is what's happening between the Americans and the Taliban. Unless Ghani and Abdullah say that what is happening is not acceptable. If you recollect, the last nail in the American Karzai relationship coffin was when Karzai objected to the manner in which some kind of a dialogue was to take place in Qatar when the Taliban had put the sign there, Islamic Emirate, and this Emirate flag was up and he had walked out. Unless Ghani and Abdullah now decide that, look, all this which is taking place, the way Khalilzad is operating is not correct. After all, it's negotiations requires patience, it requires self-restraint and self-control. But at the same time, it requires also that a party maintains its self-respect. And you can't have people waiting in the lobby, your own representatives waiting in the lobby, if these reports are correct, that they were waiting in the lobby only to be told the Taliban have said, no, we won't meet. These things have to be choreographed in advance.
You mentioned that Ambassador Khalilzad had probably not come to New Delhi on his travels in the region because of Pakistani sensitivities. How should India be doing this? You have been a proponent of of India talking to the Taliban, not giving into their demands. We were present as observers. Key diplomats of the recent past in Afghanistan were present there as observers, as was the US in Moscow. Today, I believe Hanifa Atmar, the ex-NSA who could possibly also run for president against Ashraf Ghani, has met Ambassador. How should India dealing with this proactively?
I've maintained for over a year now, I think about a year and a half, that we should open up contacts with the Taliban. And that I've also written that I, for one, cannot believe that in Moscow, the two Indian representatives, two of my uh, very dear colleagues, one a distinguished successor, another a distinguished successor and another job, uh, had only exchanged salams. I'm sure as these dynamics play out in these meetings, some more discussions would have taken place. And therefore, these lines of communication with the Taliban should remain open. Which does not mean, and I must underline that does not mean that we are endorsing what the Taliban is. It does not even mean that we are formally recognizing the Taliban. This is how the diplomatic game is played. That the Taliban, and I'm sure that for on Taliban's part, despite their closeness with Pakistan, they wouldn't mind. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that they would welcome these kind of contacts with us.
Ambassador Katju, thanks so much for giving us time again on SNI.
Pleasure, as always. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.